Well, my name is Theresa Spence, Chief of Attawapiskat, and my spiritual name is She Who Carries the Truth. Well, I grew up in the railway. My stepdad used to work on the tracks there. It's between Morsini and Carcan. It's called Outer Rapids, 3 miles away from there. So I was raised there, and we had a good life. It was peaceful, and we were never bored. Like from sunrise to sunset, we were always occupied in doing chores and doing things with the land, like going chopping and snaring rabbits. So it was a life that I really enjoy until I went to a residence school when I was 6 years old.
There's no money mismanaged. There's no money missing. This is a straightforward audit, a very quick audit. Apparently only 10 days, not any time for them to go and get the missing things from a warehouse or anything like that.
Show support because I realize that what Chief Spence is doing, and she's not really the only person, and there's the whole Idle No More movement, is indicative of a huge amount of frustration on the part of First Nations and Aboriginal peoples. You'll recall that back in 2008, the Prime Minister, representing all Canadians, talked about, this was at the time when he apologized for the residential schools situation, but at the time he spoke of a new beginning, a positive step in forging a new relationship, I'm quoting him here, between Aboriginal peoples and other Canadians, a relationship based on knowledge of our shared history. And he goes on, and really the point is that he has not lived up to his words. And what Chief Spence is doing, and the Idle No More movement is indicating that they have lost faith in this government and that they're feeling a huge amount of frustration and that, really things are getting desperate. She very much wants to meet with one person in the government, and that is the Prime Minister, the person that I just finished quoting, who talked about a new beginning and who has not lived up to that. There have been numerous instances where, this government simply does not seem to understand that when you live up to your treaty obligations, which for First Nations are, and this is the word they use, sacred covenants, when you live up to those, you have an obligation to consult. And if you look at all of the legislation that this government is passing, they do it without consulting the First Nations and Aboriginal peoples. So that is profoundly insulting and is profoundly failing in the obligations that this government has had with First Nations through these treaties, which, as I say, are extremely important documents. So this is an enormous amount of frustration that's showing itself in the case of Chief Spence through her hunger strike. It's a plea, it's a heartfelt plea to start a dialogue with the Prime Minister and to ask him to consult when he puts through legislation that affects First Nations.
Chief Spence's supporters include opposition MPs who want her demands met, but the government still says Spence can only have a meeting with the Minister of Aboriginal Affairs.
Is there room for a compromise where you would meet with the Minister rather than the Prime Minister?
No, because I dealt with his little ministers before, and they don't really work with us. They always put a band-aid solution.
They think you're trying to blackmail the Prime Minister into a meeting, and he can't set a precedent by agreeing to that.
No, it's not a blackmail. Maybe for him it's a blackmail, but for me, it's a voice to him saying it's time for a meeting. was always feel alone and not loved. And all these years I blame my mom for it. But after learning about the history of the resident school, what happened, and she was a resident survivor too, so this is where I learned to understand why she was like the way she was, not affectionate to me. So, it was really, most of us died with that pain, the resident school syndrome. And even for me, I feel like even though I'm going for counseling, the pain is still there. It doesn't seem to want to go away, even though I have the tools to work with it. But it's just the pain is there. It seems like you can't close a chapter of that part of our life. Then when just knowing that, seeing this generation, they're still carrying that pain that what we went through in a residence school, and it's not a good life, and our generation deserve a secure life and a life of freedom, not a life of pain and fear, what we went through our generation. It's important to walk together, take our hands together and walk.
At the height of its power, De Beers controlled over 90% of the world's diamonds. It was one of the most successful monopolies in history, and it was built on the backs of cheap black labor. The De Beers mines made use of the segregated compound system. Miners were virtual prisoners unable to leave until their contracts were up. They made use of the pass laws. Once released from the compounds, miners had no free movement in the country. Their pass was good only for a return trip to their homeland. De Beers shaped many of the systems on which apartheid was later based. the whole country would become not unlike a De Beers diamond mining camp. Mickey Oppenheimer, chairman of De Beers, for over 100 years the hub of a global diamond empire, greets the who's who of the current ANC government of South Africa, including the deputy president, Phumzile Lambonuka, one of the most powerful politicians in the country.
Huge things have been done here, and it's particularly important to appreciate what diamonds have done for South Africa.
It's time for everybody to work together. That means the government too, and to treat us with respect and honor. Even that treaty, that was the purpose of that treaty, is to go in peace and honor each other and respect each other and fly together with the future, not to go separate ways. And this is what's been happening with the government. It's not listening or honoring our leadership. It's really unfortunate the way the government is doing things to us, but our youth, our grassroots, are making all the movement right now. You know, and it's good to see that they're giving a message to the government: enough is enough. We're not going to take it no more, because it is our future. It's our responsibility, not his. And this is why I'm doing this. Is for the children, not just First Nation children, but the Canadian citizens' children, to walk together. and that's the future the way it's supposed to be. The Creator put us here to love each other, to care for each other, and to be in peace, not to disrespect and control other people's life.
An impact benefits agreement between the community itself and the mine, and I would hope that that agreement would address issues like this as well, specific issues like this. But really it's an agreement between the company and the First Nation, and both parties should be very jealous of their agreement and defend their agreement and do everything within their power to make this type of agreement work.
Hoping to do the right thing, which is here to tell the Prime Minister that he should sit down with Chief Spence and First Nations and people and leaders and sit down and say, look, we have some very serious problems in this country. We have substandard housing on our First Nations reserves. We have educational disparities for schooling on First Nation reserves. We have 600 women that have disappeared and the government has never looked into it. We have all sorts of disparities in this country. We have, land claims that are sitting on the side that have been abandoned. We have a lot to resolve here, and it's not good enough to make a grand single declaration back in 2008 and talk about a new beginning and then not live up to it. We have that obligation. That is what Chief Spence is trying to bring notice to, and that is what the growing Idle No More movement is trying to do. And the responsible government would sit down and begin that dialogue that has been promised for a long time.